My name is Joris Peels, and this is another episode of 3D Printing News Unpeeled, thanks to 3dprint.com. So the first little news item we're talking about is the Powercore. And this is absolutely wonderful Kickstarter. And it's made by Rack Robotics. The signups are, from what I can tell, actually full at the moment. So you can't actually participate in this Kickstarter anymore and maybe send them a message or something because they could potentially expand it. But from what it looks like, the Kickstarter is full, having raised over $75,000. So what is it for? It is simply a power pack, power core, they call it, that can, together with your 3D printer, turn your 3D printer into an EDM machine. And EDM is something we use a lot in 3D printing to finish parts usually. You can also use it to shape parts to a certain degree, or cut parts or cut paths into parts and all this kind of stuff. And it's just something I'd never considered. I mean, I thought of other desktop machines that would be cool to have. We saw, of course, Maiku and others that have desktop forming kind of technologies and stuff like that. But desktop EDM is something that I'd never considered that we'd ever have. So I think this is a great development. I think there could be a lot more things in there, like more accessible CNC equipment. Think of lathes, think of milling kind of equipment. And there's much more finishing equipment, like abrasive finishing equipment, that we could be creating as well. So I think it's wonderful this is going on. And yeah, they seem to be doing really well with enough backers. The price of the thing was about $300 to $400, which I think is really affordable. If this actually ends up going to market and working, I think it's a wonderful product. I don't know what exactly you could do with this model, but just the idea of being able to do desktop EDM is just absolutely fantastic. So the next thing, the next news item is Authentise RFQ Responder. So RFQs are a pain to make. They're really pain to set them up and to fill out all the information you need, all the questions you want. An RFQ Responder is a part of Authentise that you can use separately from Authentise as well, which helps you set up RFQs, but also helps you in a collaborative way answer them. And this is a big problem with service bureaus. And I've been on the other end of this myself, where you're trying to respond to a customer. They have an RFQ. It's super long and it's super complicated. And there's always questions, and all the formats are just a little bit different. And you have to not only read through it yourself and spend a lot of time on it, then you need Shelley from accounting, and then you need Paul from the material side, and you need to interface all these people. So it's super complicated. It takes a lot of time. And that really means that not a lot of RFQs get answered. Not a lot of people have the time to respond to all these things and respond well. And by kind of doing a collaborative kind of functionality on there, by having a kind of pre-filled out kind of functionality as well, that lets people pre-fill a lot of fields so they don't have to fill it out again, it really simplifies the RFQs process, which will mean, of course, that the person who makes the RFQ will get more responses and maybe better pricing, find a better vendor. And for a service bureau, this might mean that if more people use this, they can respond to more of these things. So this is a great thing for the whole market because, yeah, the RFQ process, some people have to do it. Some people have to do it from corporate, some from the EU and things like this. Other ones have to have a policy on this. But I think it'd be better for everyone if we just spend a lot of less time on RFQs. So I think this is a fantastic kind of templatable workflow type of solution. So I think that's really, really wonderful. And I think it will save a lot of people a ton of money going forward. So I think that's absolutely wonderful. The next thing is it's a 3D printing concrete example again. So this is 3D printing concrete of a film set or film studio for a TV show. What they're basically doing is they're making concrete elements, and these elements are printed with recesses, and in the recesses they put LED lighting. So they're going to prepare for the LED lighting, and they put a LED lighting strip, and that can cause this wall to change color, as you can see in the next picture. So then they can kind of have more of a mood lighting, a different kind of environment. They could flash it if certain things happen. They could do the intro with it. They could use this kind of LED, which is in and of itself inexpensive. The 3D printing concrete technology, which could be also inexpensive depending on what they use. And they could use this to create a little different ambiances in these film sets. So in looking at this, I love this as a market because think about if you're looking at this from a film studio perspective, you can also just cover this. You can have a guy paint over it. You can cover it with different materials and stuff like that. And you can quite easily make a film set for this. So think about like concrete 3D printing for film sets, for movie theater, for theater sets, for film studios to make like rocks and other kind of outcroppings or castles or something like that, that you would 3D print the facade and then like put concrete underneath it by hand, over it by hand to put the rocks to make it look like a medieval castle, that kind of thing. So I love this as an example, and it really, really shows us that there's a lot more possible with 3D printing construction than we're thinking. I'm not as excited about houses as other people, but I'm very excited about stuff like this where we have like we're only going to make one of them. We need to make it a certain location, it needs to be a certain shape. For these kind of things, 3D printing tends to really, really make sense. Also, I love the idea of like, pre-integrating or integrating these recesses to then pop in the electronics. That's of course going to save us a lot of time if you, think of that as also for wiring and other kind of elements and stuff like this. The project was done by the Casinos Austria, the Austrian Lotteries Group, working with Philipp Aduatz and Dominik Freynschlag. And the 3D printing company that did this was Incremental 3D, which is an Austrian concrete 3D printing company. So I think it's an absolutely fantastic example. And think about like all these low volume buildings, but don't only think it now, of course, we're 3D printing it to look like 3D, it's 3D printing because that's cool. Right? But think about if you want to do a medieval castle or a souk from the 14th century or some other kind of thing, or you want something to look like it's the south of France. 3D printing is a really easy vehicle to make you a wall of a specific shape that you can then by hand, or perhaps even at one point with a 3D printer, customize to look a certain way. So I think this is a super fantastic kind of tool. It's new, and I hadn't thought of this before, and I think this is really great. We've talked before about 3D printing shop interiors. We've talked about, of course, of formwork. We've talked about bridges and tunnels and things like this directly. Of course, we've talked about houses and military buildings and stuff like this, but I think this is one of these applications that really shows you that this 3D printing construction thing could have a lot of legs, and it can be used for a lot more things than we think are the case now. Anyway, so thank you very much for your time today. My name is Joris Peels. This is another edition of 3D Printing News Unpeeled. This comes to you thanks to 3dprint.com. Yeah, keep watching, and thank you so much for being here today. Have a great day.